Good morning. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to the May 5th, 2020 special meeting of the Glendale City Council. Due to evolving situation with COVID-19 and the health recommendations from LA County Health Department, the Glendale City Council meeting will be available to the public electronically. Due to social distancing requirements, the public will not be able to attend the meeting. The public is encouraged to watch and participate from the safety of their homes to practice social distancing. This meeting can be viewed on local cable, Charter Cable Channel 6 and the Spectrum Cable Channel, and AT&T UVerse Channel 99. You may also stream online through our website, www.glendalecalifornia.gov, by scrolling all the way to the bottom of the web page and selecting live streaming, which is the third icon from the left. For public comments and questions during the meeting, call 818-937-8100, which will be on your screen. I don't see it now. Oh, it's on top. So you can see on top the number has been recorded on top. City staff will be submitting these questions and comments in real time to the appropriate person during this special meeting. With this being said, may I have roll call, please?
Councilmember Brotman.
Here.
Devine.
Here.
Kasakian.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
And Mayor Agajanian.
Present. Before I go to the next item, I would like to announce it's with a heavy heart and great sadness that I am announcing that my dear friend of 40 years, Dr. Nubar Janoyan, who is our neighbor to the west of this building, passed away late, very late last night. I will always treasure the friendship of this kind and sincere man. God bless his soul.
Sorry.
Next item, please.
The agenda for the Tuesday, May 5th, 2020 special public meeting on the City Council was posted on Tuesday, April 28th, 2020 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. Next item, please.
One would be finance regarding budget study session, COVID-19 financial impacts, fiscal year 2019-2020 general fund update, fiscal year 2020-21 general fund budget, Measure S discussion, projects for consideration, and organizational profile.
Thank you. So, City Manager Yasmin Beers.
Yes, Mayor Agajanian. Morning, can you hear me?
It's kind of a low
Not
voice.
really.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor Agajanian and members of the City Council. We find ourselves in yet another financial crisis, one I think that none of us have ever dealt with before here in the city of Glendale and around the world. By all means, this is a very scary time. It's a scary time for everyone as it relates to COVID-19 and as it relates to the financial impacts that people are experiencing. In many respects, the City of Glendale and its organization is ready for the challenges of the economic impacts based on where we've been in the past. As we go through this budget process, it is important for us to be as measured as we possibly can be in our approach. We have to be responsive, most definitely, but not reactive to the many, many disruptions that we may see around us. Today, as the clerk read into the record, we are going to go through a number of slides with you to start the budget process for the 2021 fiscal year. and provide you with some information as it relates to 19-20 fiscal year, this current fiscal year, what the financial impacts look like in terms of the impacts of COVID-19, what the revenue projections are today, what we believe they look like going into 2021, with the understanding that it is a fluid situation, with the understanding that we have to be patient and understand that we will be before the City Council numerous times, even after budget adoption, to provide you with financial updates as they become available. This morning, as you see, we do have a bit of a different setup here in the chambers. We do have 3 council members present, and we thank you for that. And we do have 2 council members who are joining us by way of WebEx, and we appreciate that as well for the social distancing piece of it. And of course, we have staff here, department heads, to be able to respond to any questions that may come up. With that, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'd like to ask our finance director, Ms. Flynn, to take you through the slides and answer any questions that you may have. Ms. Flynn.
Great.
Ms. Flynn.
Thank you, Ms. Beers. Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of council. It's our pleasure to present to you this morning our first study session for the fiscal year 2020-21 budget. Before I jump into the slides, I'd like to say a huge thank you to my entire budget team. They have worked so hard, long weekends, lots of hours to get us to this point. We have Adranea Sion as our deputy director, Mari Karamian is our budget manager, and watching at home are our 3 budget analysts, Karina, Nairi, and Jonathan. In addition, all of our city departments, executives, and their budget teams have put in a lot of work in helping us get here. And of course, our city management team, led by Ms. Beers and Mr. Galanian. Putting together the budget every year is probably one of the largest citywide projects that we do, and it definitely takes a village to get us to this point to present to you at council. So with that, as the clerk read into the record, our agenda this morning, we will be covering the COVID-19 financial impacts. We'll look at the general fund update for fiscal year 2019-20, and we will jump into fiscal year 2021. The proposed general fund budget, our 5-year forecast, Measure S discussion, some projects for council to consider. We will look at our citywide organizational profile and then review the budget adoption calendar. And of course, we're here to answer any questions that you might have along the way, or we can have them at the end as well, however you decide. To kind of give you a little bit of a frame of reference on how we get to this point in the process, typically by about the early part of March or mid-March, we've done a lot of work to get us the revenue estimates for the city, especially in the general fund. Not only that, we're looking at the expenditure side of the house. So as you can imagine, when the shelter-in-place orders came about around that same time, our forecasts weren't very old at that point. We had basically just completed them. And there were things that we knew right away that we were going to have to do, and things that we still don't know as of today, several weeks later. Some of the first things we knew that we were going to have to do is obviously revise those projections. With everything being closed, lots of businesses not able to operate in the same manner that they normally operate, definitely impacts the economy of Glendale as well as the county and the state. That directly impacts our sales tax revenue. It impacts general consumer spending overall in various areas such as utilities and other areas. So as the weeks began to unfold and we had more and more data that we could look at, we're still looking at ways of how our shelter at home orders are going to be lifted, what that actually means for our economy, what consumer behavior is going to look like. A lot of that is still unknown to us. So we've utilized multiple resources to try and get our financial impacts to you today and provide to you our updates for the forecast with the revenue side of the house as well as the expenditure side. It's obviously not a unique situation to Glendale. Every city, county, and state in this nation are dealing with the same things. And as Ms. Beers mentioned, this is all very new territory for us because we've never experienced anything like this before. The resources we utilize, we have a sales tax consultant and property tax consultant, that's HDL Companies, excuse me. And for our utility users tax for gas, video, and telecom, we utilize Muni Services. We've been working with them to get revised estimates for the revenues in the general fund. In addition, on our transient occupancy taxes, which is our hotel tax, we've done some research on our own and reached out to various hotel owners and operators to get a gauge of what their occupancy levels look like during this time. We've also looked at various trends that we can look at for what their previous revenues look like. And then, of course, working with our departments that are close to operations such as those and other areas of the city for, especially in Parks and Rec and community development with licenses, permits, and fees, and different charges for services. I've been in contact via email with my counterparts in our neighboring cities and looking at the various listservs that we belong to with our organization in California for finance officers. And it really helps provide us a little bit of a sanity check that we're all looking at things in a fairly consistent manner, as well as knowing that we have to probably come back, not even probably, definitely will come back to council as more and more information is available to us. So with that said, on slide 4, we'll review our sales tax estimates. These have been provided to us by our consultant, HDL Companies. Sales tax makes up about 19% of the revenues in the general fund, and that's the second highest revenue source that we have next to property taxes. So as you can imagine, it's taking a significant hit with a lot of the businesses closed in the city and the stay-at-home orders that are in place. The good news is that before all of this occurred, we had nearly 9 months of very good sales tax activity for the city of Glendale, and we were actually trending higher than what we had anticipated when we adopted the budget last year. The bad news is that this was an immediate impact. When businesses close, basically their sales go away. Or if they have to alter their businesses, as some restaurants have done, with only takeout and curbside pickup, that definitely is an immediate impact. On top of that, the state has imposed a couple of deferral programs for smaller businesses that they can defer their sales tax that they would normally be collecting at this time to be able to pay that at a later date. That is yet to be determined as what that impact could potentially be for Glendale or any city. So if businesses do take advantage of that, it's a delayed cash flow as long as that business remains in operation. So if you look at the chart for fiscal year 2019-20, our decrease is about $2.9 million. For fiscal year 2021, the decrease is a little higher at $5.6 million. Our recovery is going to be slow over the next 24 to 36 months. We have a boost in our online sales that helps the county and state pool allocations that Glendale gets. And as I mentioned, there's the deferment that is for small businesses. Glendale has a little over 2,000 of those small businesses that fall into that category. If every single one of them took the opportunity to do that deferral, it would be about $1.5 million. So we've factored in a portion of that into our forecast, knowing that not every business will likely take advantage of that. Impacts in the various industries are consistent for our Measure S sales tax revenue as well. So the chart shows every category where businesses fall, everything from autos to building and construction, food and drugs, consumer goods, et cetera. And you can see the decrease from the impacts year over year from fiscal year 2019 and then fiscal year 2021. The reason 2021, the impacts are smaller in those is because it's already being compared to the previous year, which has the larger decrease. Moving on to slide 5, utility users tax, or our UUT estimates. UUT for Glendale is collected on electric, water, gas, video, and telecom services, and it makes up about 11% in total of the general fund revenues. So with this, our Muni Services is our consultant that handles the gas and video and telecom portions of the UUT, and they are not seeing huge decreases at this point with regards to COVID-19 in those areas. What we can attribute part of this decrease, or most of this decrease to, is in the reduction in utilities for our commercial businesses. So on the electric, water, and gas side. Telecom and video will likely remain pretty steady unless people start canceling their services at home. So the decrease on the commercial side is the larger portion of this. The increase on the residential side, with a lot of us working at home and children at home from school, does not quite make up for the reduction on the commercial side. And then the weather has been a lot cooler on top of that. So those impacts are there for 1920 is $715,000, and for 2021, $1.2 million. Under transient occupancy tax, or our TOT estimate, this is our hotel tax in the city of Glendale. This makes up about 3% of the general fund revenues, and it falls into the category of occupancy and other taxes. For 1920, as you can imagine, the decrease is pretty instantaneous, with a lot of hotels having to close and reservations being canceled. The impact is 1.1 million, and for 2021, it's 1 million. The reason 2021 is not as large is because we do have 2 new hotels coming online during 2021, and according to everyone that we've spoken with regarding this in community development, those hotels are still scheduled to open. What their occupancy levels will look like is yet to be determined. Overall, occupancy is down across all of our hotels. In some cases, the smaller ones are even closed and don't have any reservations. And some of the difficulty in estimating these taxes is that the hotel operators have reservations on the books for future months, just not knowing when people may cancel. They are taking cancellations daily, and in some cases, they've reduced their nightly rates. So that amount is definitely going to be impacted. Slide 6 will cover licenses and permit estimates. These come from primarily our community development department, and that's in the planning, applications, and building safety activity, as well as code compliance. The decrease there is $1.9 million for fiscal year 1920, and for 2021, the decrease is $2 million. These impacts are pretty instantaneous, as well as our counters have closed, and people who are anticipating doing remodels on their home have rethought that, and the timing of that business coming back will likely happen at some point, just when is unclear at this time. Charges for services, we have the fiscal year impact for 1920 at 1.4 million, and for 2021 is 660,000. This is primarily from our community services and parks department, where we have a lot of closures in all of our closures on facilities. Contract classes have been canceled, camps have been canceled, and when those facilities start to open up, they will not be opening up completely. So there'll be partial openings into the next year, and probably not until early fall. And then some of those classes will resume at some point, but at what level is also yet to be determined. So if we look at the overall fiscal year 1920 impacts and where we propose our general fund revenues to end up, you can look at slide 8, and that gives you all the categories of our general fund resources. And I should mention, with property taxes, at this point, there's no indication that assessed valuations will be declining. If that happens, we will not see the impact in our property taxes for at least 18 more months. And that does take a little bit of time in how the assessor does the assessments once a year and when those payments start to come in. But at this point, there doesn't look like there's going to be any changes in assessed valuation, which then means our property tax base will hold. And that's what we've forecasted in our forecast, as well as what we've received from our consultants. So if you look at the chart, you can see the impacts we just talked about in sales tax in the third column over from COVID-19 losses. So the areas are sales tax, the utility users tax. Under occupancy and other taxes, that is our TOT. And then our licenses and permits and charges for services. So in total, we're looking at losses of $7.96 million, or 3.4% of the revised revenue estimates prior to COVID-19. And I should mention that we had made some revisions downward in our utility users tax as well as our transfers because of the trending that we were seeing and the decreases that we were already seeing. Those decreases are not attributable to COVID-19. They're just budgetary forecasts that we had made prior to COVID-19. On slide 9 is the other side of the equation, is in our expenditures by department in the general fund. And you can see there on some departments have had reoccurring adjustments during the year. In particular is the police memorandum of understanding, the agreement that we reached with our GPOA. That is in that second column from the left. And then our one-time adjustments include carryovers and any council actions that have come to you since adoption of the budget. Some of the items there are the electric bus transfer and the city clerk elections, and then there's also carryovers, as I mentioned. The third line from the bottom will give, and all the way over to the right, will give you our total budget, revised budget for the fiscal year 2019-20 for the general fund at $242.4 million. We've done a budget estimated savings number of $10.5 million, and what that is basically made up of salaries savings as well as maintenance and operations savings. This is trending for us of where we think we're going to end the year. We do this every year, and then on top of it, for this year, we've got the added savings of some closures as well as hourly wages in different departments. And then on the flip side of that, we have some additional expenditures as a result of COVID-19. So all that is factored in, and of that $10.5 million, 7.6 of it is in salary and benefits, and the remaining is in maintenance and operations and transfers. So we will end the year, we're expecting to end the year around $231.9 million in expenditures. And then if we go to slide 10, the resources we just talked about are revenues of $225.47 million. And then we do use some assigned fund balance from economic development of $628,000 to cover some expenses there. So our total resources of $226 million, less our adjusted revised budget of expenditures of $231.9 million. We are projecting a net loss for this current fiscal year of $5,833,000. And you'll see that in the forecast in a few slides. Does anyone have any questions at this point?
Yeah, I have some little questions as we're going. I wasn't sure
Sure.
if you want to do them now or at the end.
It's okay, you can ask.
Well, I mean, just some little things. You mentioned the city clerk election, so how's that, is that flowing back in because we're not doing the election? This is on slide 9, the $1,083,000.
That is for the primary, or the election that we had
March election.
this past March.
Oh, you said city clerk election.
Yes. It's in their budget to do the elections. That payment goes to the county.
Okay, so this is for the past election?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I also, let's see, page or slide 6, where you have the licenses and permits. So you're seeing a decrease of, you say 18%, and I guess this is off of your original forecast, right?
Correct.
What you say, planning applications and building safety activity estimated decrease of 60% for this coming fiscal year, right?
Correct. This current fiscal year, yes. That's the activity.
For the coming fiscal year, the one we're planning for, right? It says 35% and 60% respectively?
For fiscal year
Oh, this is building and
1920.
safety and permit applications.
There-
Okay.
yes.
This is for this year.
Yes, this year.
Okay.
Their activity is down that much.
Okay, got it. All right, thank you.
Sure.
Please continue.
Okay, so let's jump into fiscal year 2021, general fund proposed budget. On slide 12, you'll see a similar chart that you just saw for the current fiscal year. This is looking at next year. All of our revenue categories in the general fund. Our initial proposed resources, these were the estimates that we had just done in the early part of March, as I mentioned. Now with COVID-19, we've factored in some changes, and that is in the second column. We've talked about those today. And the total on that is $11,367,000. So our final proposed resources in the general fund for next fiscal year is $233,366,000, and that there's a 4.6% impact for the COVID losses from what we had originally proposed to our final proposal that we're bringing to you today. Looking at slide 13, what this slide does is it takes our revised fiscal year 1920 budget and reconciles it to where we are going to propose our 2021 budget. So you can see the changes in the various categories, salaries and benefits, maintenance and operations, as well as our transfers. And then the net decrease in our salaries and benefits is a little over $1 million, and that's primarily attributable to our estimated vacancy savings. Every year, we do have vacancy savings that just naturally occur in the general fund because of turnover and just positions staying vacant for some time. However, this coming fiscal year, there is a hiring freeze in place, so this number is estimated to be a little bit higher than it normally would be. And in our maintenance and operations, we've got some differences going up and down. Our liability insurance rates, those are the rates that we pay for various insurance coverage and claims, so we have a little bit of higher expenditures there from last year. Our information services department service charge, $557,000. That's a slight increase over what was paid to them last year. And then our fleet and equipment rental charge is coming down by $777,000, and all other maintenance and operations costs net out to an increase of $911,000.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Sure.
Go back to chart, slide 12.
Okay.
So occupancy and other taxes, so the changes will be so small from 19,196 proposed. Now your final proposed resource, it says 18 million, I guess, 201,000?
Correct. Correct.
So the change is, so like the hotels, they're gonna have guests, they have to have guests pretty soon? then?
So that number, that almost $1 million reduction is strictly for our occupancy, TOT. And we do
Right.
have 2 new hotels that will be opening up next fiscal year. So what we've estimated in our forecast is some level of recovery for all of our hotels to slowly start opening up in the summer and into the early fall. Not fully, only partially. And then as time goes, obviously, if that changes, we're going to be coming to you with an update. This is what we can guess at this point, because we just really don't know at what level those are going to start opening up. And there are other taxes in this number to make up that whole 19 million or 18 million now. We have our franchise taxes in there, and we have property transfer taxes, and our landfill assessment that we had collect in there.
So also on the property taxes,
Yes.
so you expect that the property value will not be decreased then?
At this point, there is no indication that those values will go down. And if they do, we will not realize them until the next fiscal year because of the timing of when the assessor does the assessed values and then when people get their bills to pay them. There's a lag that occurs. So the fiscal year 2021 will not experience that because the assessed valuations have already happened for that fiscal year.
Okay, thank you. That's, I think this is, I hope these numbers will be correct because I expect the situation will be worse than what you are mentioned here. But anyway, that's an opinion. I have no facts.
And as
If I could add, if I could add something, yeah, look, I mean, what concerns me the most is looking at, we're proposing 18.2 million in this coming fiscal year, which is a 17% increase from the current fiscal year. Year over year, we're looking at a 17% increase in occupancy and other taxes. To me, that's hard for me to get my head around, 17% increase.
But anyway,
And-
this is a projection.
And
I
that's
guess.
not, that's not all TOT.
I understand.
TOT is.
How much of it is TOT?
About 9 million. So we
So
had-
half.
Yeah, I think so. Let me double check. 8.1 is the TOT.
So out of the 18.2 that we're projecting, 8 is TOT and the
Yes.
rest are other taxes?
Landfill assessment, the property transfer tax, as well as franchise tax.
Are you able to show what the year-on-year change is in just the TOT? If you were to break out
Yes,
fiscal year, this current fiscal year and next fiscal year?
absolutely. We do have that for you.
Okay, because maybe what's happening is it's being, the story is kind of getting blurred because there are these various taxes, and some of them are more stable and some of them are less stable.
Right.
And the addition of 2 hotels that are going to come on board in this new fiscal year that didn't last year, depending again on occupancy.
Yeah, yeah.
And that forecasting is, as you all have mentioned, and the challenges with forecasting in an environment that we're all in at this point makes it extremely challenging
doubt.
to really understand what we're going to look like in 2021 and into the future. And so this is the best information that we have at hand based on a number of variables that are in place and information that we have at hand along with our consultant and reaching out in this particular case to all of the hotels in this community to get an understanding of where they may be. But in terms of the comparison from 1920 to 2021, Michelle can provide that information.
So for fiscal year 1920, our TOT, the revised estimate is 6.4 million
For this year.
for this current fiscal year. That's the revised estimate.
And we have that going up to 8.
And then we have that going up to almost 8.1 for next fiscal year. Again, this is assuming hotels can start reopening in part of the summer, not fully, but partially, more than what they are currently, as well as new hotels coming online.
And sorry if I could ask one more question. The new hotels that are coming online, can you remind me, what is their business? I mean, to what extent are they going to be tied to events that may not be occurring, larger kind of conferences and things like that?
That I'm not aware of. I don't know.
Mr. Broadman, this is Phil Lansfane. They are both business class hotels, and so they will be tied to business. As business travel increases, so too will they. Whatever kind of event spin-off benefit they were expecting would also come along with when those come online.
Because, I mean, our current thinking is there won't be any events for a good year.
Yeah. I just heard yesterday on the news that business travel will come back approximately after 4 years. It will go to the same level of past, let's say. So I don't know how that's going to impact our hotel occupancy and other matters which we have mentioned here. So they
And we-
expect almost 4 years to go back to the same level, so
And we may come back and have to readjust this line item as well as others. And that's why we're going to be providing council updated reports as we go, because the more information we get as time goes, the better these estimates will get. At this point in time, it's extremely difficult past June. It's very fuzzy. And there's lots of information out there, differing opinions as well.
And we
Couns-
haven't gone from zero, from mid-March to, let's say, 100% occupancy, if we're going to talk about hotels, come July 1. It's definitely a very slow uptick in terms of the use of the hotels and the proportionate TOT that would come in based on the usage of the hotel. So it doesn't go from 0 to 100%. It's definitely a very slow uptick through December of 2020 and then going into 2021. But as Ms. Flynn indicated, again, it is the best information at hand today and will be before the council on quite a regular basis, more so than we have in the past in terms of quarterly updates, to provide you with any updates that we're able to provide you.
thank you, Councilmember Najib.
Mayor, if I
Yes.
may.
Yes,
Devine.
Councilmember Devine.
Thank you. Michelle, this could be a kind of a mundane question, but this seems to be a lot of optimistic projections. Would you say that the staff and the budget team this is a conservative projection that we're getting on all of these? Because like some of them, I noticed with even with Parks and Rec, you had us making $600,000 more next year, or actually we lost over $1 million 1920, and you're projecting only $600,000 in 2021. So it just seems to me that it's like a more a positive outlook, but I'd like to know if this is conservatively speaking, because I think that's what we have to be right now, is very conservative.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Devine, I would say we are trying to be as conservative as possible with the information that we have available to us and measuring that with what we know, and every day things change. What we knew a month ago had changed 2 weeks later, changed a week later, and it's very difficult because we are dealing with somewhat of a moving target. And as things slowly start to come back, again, we don't know what that will look like because we've never experienced this before. So we've done our best guess working with the departments. We've factored in not full openings of anything for a good 3 to 6 months, and even after December of 2020, certain things are still not fully recovered. So I would say at this point it's conservative, but I will say that it can change, and that's why we do need to come back and bring you those updates. These are my counterparts in other cities are doing very similar approaches as far as coming back to council with more information as things change. It's just extremely difficult to continue to revise forecasts, and every day there's something new that comes out. So I think we've done the best that we can and being as conservative as possible, and I don't believe that we ever really have any of our initial projections to council into the budget as being other than that. So we've treated it the same way we would treat all of our budget years, and then with the revisions even more so.
Thank you, Councilmember
Thank you,
Najjar.
Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So only by way of comparison, I was speaking to the Supervisor Barger, that they passed their $35.5 billion budget for the county of Los Angeles. And I know the county revenue streams are not exactly the same type that we have, and their expenditures are a little different also, but their coronavirus impact, they figured was $2 billion out of the $35 billion budget. So that's what, 7%?
Right.
Something like that?
Yep.
So we're not far off from that. I mean, we're in the ballpark in terms of our, what's our actual percentage now that we had? You said it's 4.6%
0.6.
Correct.
as a loss. So we're sort of in the same ballpark. But as you said, it's hard to predict what's happening. The governor has a lot to say about this as to what enterprises are permitted to slowly open and ease. And second point, are we optimistic that we'll receive any state or federal funding backfilling? I know that that's something that a lot of municipalities are asking for. Why should all the money go to the state? Why should it go to the county? Do we have any expectations of getting anything from either federal or state sources
At
in
this,
terms of budget planning?
at this point, we've not factored any of that in. We just don't know if any of that will come. Any of our expenditures for COVID-19, we are tracking separately, and we'll be applying for reimbursements through Cal OES as well as FEMA. So that also, too, can be reimbursed to a full extent, or maybe partial, or maybe not at all. We've not factored those into our next year's forecast.
So most recently, they were talking about public safety, backfilling some public safety expenses, because so many of our public safety officers have been dealing with the health angle and not so much on the crime and the other fire type of issues. So just keep us posted if the county, or, I mean, if the city council or the mayor can help advocate for that through our state elected officials or our federal officials, let us know, because obviously we want to get as much as we can.
And if experience has shown us reimbursements that have occurred through the years based on disasters in general that have happened, reimbursements do happen through Cal OES and FEMA for the expenditures very much associated with that particular issue and crisis. And we have that financial and accounting piece of it down to know that we have to, line item by line item, make sure that we are keeping track of those expenditures so that we can submit to Cal OES and FEMA for those reimbursements. And they're very particular in their accounting standards and
I mean, our
paperwork.
fire program, where we're delivering food and all that, I mean, that's a great, we're doing it without expectation of reimbursement, but certainly it's efforts that are being used to alleviate the coronavirus effect. So get your spreadsheet out, chief, and, keep track of those hours. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Ms.
Can I,
Lee.
can I ask
Oh,
a
yes,
question to my
please.
colleague, to Councilmember Najarian? Just, when you spoke to Supervisor Barger and she said down 7%, you said, was that from last year? Was that a year-over-year decrease in revenues? Was that a decrease off of an original projection? What is that 7%?
Yeah, so it's down, their tax revenues, and they get money from all sorts of sources, but their tax revenues are expected to be down, and they project it 6 months at a time, but $1 billion for the first 6 months of this fiscal year and $1 billion for the next 6 months. So that's how they had to adjust their budget with those numbers in mind.
Down from the prior year.
Down from the prior year.
So a 7% year-over-year decline in revenue is
Yes.
what they're expecting.
Yes.
See, so that's not what because we actually have a slight increase in revenue year-over-year. So that's quite different from
Yeah.
us.
I guess it's because we have these, at least in the hotel field, we've got, how many, 3, 4 new hotels coming on that give us the opportunity. So that percentage growth, and that's probably a 20% growth in our hotels, or maybe 30% in rooms, based on everything we have.
And
I don't think the county has that expectation.
Yeah, I mean, I know every
Tax-
agency is different, but we are up 4%. We are growing our proposed revenues by 4% year-over-year. Yeah. So I would be very interested in seeing the actual numbers that are coming in from some of the other cities, I know every city's different. I know it's so hard. But at least as a benchmark, I mean, are other cities actually projecting revenue increases year over year? I'd be very interested in seeing that.
Thank you. Ms. Flynn?
Okay, so moving on to slide 14 is our fiscal year 2020-21 general fund five-year forecast. The first column there is our estimated actuals, where we believe we're going to end the current fiscal year 1920. So you can see down towards the bottom, our change in fund balance of 5.8. That's the deficit we just talked about a few slides ago. We do estimate some carryovers in our budget every year. These are expenditures that don't get fully expended in the current fiscal year, and they do get carried over into the following fiscal year. These are things such as open contracts and expenditures that are committed to spending. So net decrease for this current fiscal year is 6.6 million, and our proposed 2021 budget has a net deficit or decrease in our fund balance of 4.8 million. And then you can see our projections going out to fiscal year 24-25. And as every time we show you this forecast, it is a snapshot in time of the information that we have. So the PERS rates that we know of today are built in. Our MOU obligations for our associations that we know of today are built in, and the revenue estimates that we know of today are also built in. So we do the best we can when we're updating this, and we do update it regularly to council and provide those updates for you. Any questions on the forecast?
Just, to me, it's like we are very optimistic on total resources. I'm looking at total resources, where it's 226 million, then goes 234, 241, 244, 248, and 252. I mean, I don't know about 2022 to 23, but my expectation from 2020 to 21 and 21 to 22, I mean, I hope this is a correct prediction.
And again, our largest tax base, being property taxes, is not declining. It's actually increasing because we do get the assessed valuations from the county. They can go up to 2% total per year, and what's factored into the forecast is about 1.5% each year in the assessed valuation. So that does make a large difference in the amounts, because that does represent our largest tax base in the general fund. And the areas that we felt are COVID-19 impacted have been reduced, such as sales tax. That does not come back to pre-COVID-19 levels until the fifth year in this forecast. Okay. So looking at slide 15 is our fund balance projections for this current fiscal year end, as well as next fiscal year, and looking at our total budget. So we started the year, our adjusted fund balance for the beginning of this fiscal year was $82.8 million, or 34.9%. We take out the loss for the current fiscal year, and then the carryovers of $800,000, and then we are projecting to end this current fiscal year at $76,169,000, or 32%. And looking at next fiscal year's loss of almost $4.8 million, the projected ending fund balance at June 30th, 2021 will be $71.4 million, or 30%. And if you recall, council's policy for the fund balance in the general fund is a floor of 25% with a target of 35%. Moving on to...
Before we go to Measure S, Mr.
Yes,
Mayor.
please.
The,
Councilman Najarian.
What line is the transfer? The transfer, you know.
Which line?
Yeah, where is that
Slide
indicated?
12.
Is that
If-
slide 13,
if you-
transfers out?
If you look
No,
at, no,
slide
it's, if
12.
you look at slide 12, it's transfers in, it
And,
transfers from other funds.
okay. And are we,
And the percentage that we're, have come down to in terms of the transfers from GWP to the general fund, if you remember, years ago, we were upwards of 13, 14%, and through time, we have reduced that, and for 2021, we're at 9.5%?
9.
9%. And so we've brought that down to 9%.
so in light of the last tentative ruling, has that become a final ruling yet? No. In light of the last tentative ruling, are we on safe ground, assuming that this transfer can continue?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, to the extent that
Legally, I guess.
if the ruling is upheld after the hearing, then yes, the transfers will be able to continue as outlined in the prior years and going forward.
So it wouldn't be appropriate at this time to be executing or designing a Plan B if those transfers are deemed, let's say there's a flip in the opinion, and not just the transfers being illegal, but, paying back years. Are we, I mean, is this the prudent course of action at this point, just to assume that the judge will make his tentative a final, and then we can continue legally to make that transfer?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, yes, for a couple of reasons. One, obviously, we feel comfortable and confident with the ruling, and that it will stay going forward. The other reason is, the courts have, since we first started litigating this case over 7 years ago, some of the case law has changed, and that actually the transfers are different from what the rates are. So the transfers may be able to continue, but then you have to look at what the rates are, or what the rate impact is. But the courts have said very specifically, having a transfer itself is not a tax that violates Prop 26. So
Okay. Because last year, we were sort of we were planning, for the worst-case scenario. Who are we going to cut? What departments? But, so that's behind us, and although it's not a done deal, it's most likely that this action is appropriate.
I assume the contingency plans are still in place, and we get there. But and recall, one of the contingency plans also would be to get subsequent voter approval if necessary. So it's not just a plan to cut, but there are other contingencies that the city's made as well.
Thank you.
May I ask a question
Yes,
of
yes,
Mr.
please.
Garcia?
Councilmember Devine.
Thank you, Mayor. When do you expect the final ruling to come through? Any projection on that?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, Councilmember Devine, so our hearing on that case is set for June 30th, so it won't be before that. And I anticipate with this judge, he'll usually take the matter under submissions, meaning we'll have the hearing, he won't issue the final ruling then, and he'll come slightly later than that June 30th date.
30 days, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. At this time, I want to take a brief break and come back, if everybody is agree.
5 minutes?
Like 5 minutes break?
Okay.
All right?
Sure.
Thank you. We'll be right back. Ms. Yasmin, where? Army.
Yeah,
To
but I try to
continue.
get him out of his room. but they can't. You guys
Our
are-
soldiers
I know.
and generals are not here. Where are they?
The other general's coming, Mr. Garcia.
Okay. Anyway, this is budget study session number 1. Today is May 5th, 2020, and we are continuing our study of the budget. Okay. Ms. Yasmin Beers, City Manager.
Yes, sir. We'll go back to Ms. Flynn, our finance director.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. So I'll turn your attention to slide 17. This is our fiscal year 2021 update for Measure S, and this is a new format. Now that we have some time under our belts with Measure S revenues as well as expenditures, we're able to report to you a little bit differently, and we thought this format might help you see what the revenues coming in are as well as the expenditures that council has approved and where we project the ending balances to be for our Measure S funds. So as you recall, Measure S is a 3/4 cent local sales tax that was passed by the voters of Glendale in November of 2018. The collection of that revenue started for April through June of 2019. That was the first quarter of sales tax that was collected. So that's that first column that you see there of fiscal year 18-19, the $5,184,000. Fiscal year 1920 budget is the next column where we estimated $30 million in revenue. Council appropriated for the projects listed below under expenses for the rental rights program, housing rental subsidy program, the first-time homebuyer program, the year-round aquatics program, the holiday ice rink, as well as acquisition of land for affordable housing and fire station seismic upgrades. So total expenditures for the fiscal year 1920 budget for Measure S was $29,848,000. If we add that into our previous balance carried forward, well, actually, let me go to the actuals column. That will make a little bit more sense. So when you go to the next column, it's fiscal year 1920 actuals. We had to revise our estimate for the sales tax for Measure S. Our $30 million was a little bit too high, just not knowing exactly what we were going to be getting. We did our best in doing that estimate, but we definitely were a little too high. So the actual revision prior to COVID-19 was a little over $23 million, and after COVID-19, we are down to $22,140,000. The expenses listed in the various programs and infrastructure that council has approved, those are the actuals to date, and that what we project actually to the end of the fiscal year for each of those programs. So the total actual expenditures that we're projecting for Measure S programs is $13,882,000. And if we add that $5,184,000 that we received for the first quarter of Measure S, we will end this current fiscal year with $13,442,000 remaining. And looking at fiscal year 2021, most of what we have listed in this column is considered carryover money. So there's monies left over in each of those programs that will be carried over. The two exceptions to that are the rental rights program as well as the year-round aquatics program. That's new funding for those same programs in the next fiscal year. So projected expenditures for fiscal year 2021 are $16.8 million. And if you go back to the top, I apologize, revenues for next fiscal year are $22,170,000. Add that into what we projected our year-end balance to be for this current fiscal year. We're projecting next fiscal year's ending balance to be $18.8 million. I'll pause here because I think there might be some questions.
So, let me just say that I'm not going to object to the ice rink being kept off. Unfortunately, it was the subject of much division and derision in the community. So, I mean, we don't need that. The point was to give some of our youth and people of all ages an opportunity to have a little bit of fun during the holiday season. So let's let's let that ice rink melt into the annals of Glendale history for now.
Thank you. Okay, we'll continue.
Okay. Oh,
Can I, well,
Oh, you have a question? Councilmember Brockman.
yeah, well, so these new appropriation requests, they're going to come to us separately? Or are you requesting them now?
The two new appropriation requests are the rental rights program
Right.
administration is a continuation. It's basically doing the program again for next year, as well as the year-round aquatics program is to continue that for the following year. The others are carryover monies that are left over. So they're coming to you at this point, yes.
Oh, I mean, today, or, oh, well, this is part of, you're including these in the budget. I mean, it's just that I've not looked at these two I mean, I know about the rental rights program, and I know that's our cost, basically, to run those programs. Is that what that is?
Correct.
I'm just not, because I'm new, I'm not as familiar with some of these. So is there an opportunity for me to learn more about these two programs before we?
So what I would suggest,
Check the
Mr.
box.
Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Brotman, is if you have specific questions related to anything as part of the budget process, but anything in particular as it relates to these two items, you can ask now, or we can provide you with a briefing
Yeah. I don't-
offline
Yeah.
to give you more information about each of these programs. Ultimately, if there are specific, if there is any specific feedback for us as staff, as we're continuing to prepare the budget for adoption at the end of this month, is for council to provide us with that direction as we move forward. But for you to, get a better understanding, we can do that offline, and if you have any feedback for us, we can take it at any point between now and then.
Right, okay. I don't know enough to even know what questions to ask, so. I guess my other, more macro question is, so if we're, of course, we're expecting the same, basically flat revenues from Measure S to come in next year compared to this year.
Correct.
So I do have a question mark on that, but nonetheless, we're ending with 18.8 million. Why are we not, looking at more opportunities to deploy that money? Why are we kind of carrying over so much? I know some of it, like the land, it takes time to complete those acquisitions. And I know that on the program we have where we're providing rental subsidies to seniors, that takes time, right, to vet all those people. So I understand that. But it seems like we have some resources here. Why aren't we having a fuller discussion about what we can do with that?
We absolutely can, and it's really a policy direction by way of council and where you may want to take the Measure S discussion. Last year, when we provided information on Measure S, we had it separated out in different categories for the council to make a determination in terms of where those monies would be allocated. And again, we were in a different place last year based on the economy. This year, so the allocations and the pots of money that we brought forward was housing, kind of very broad, general housing types of programs, one of which was the rental subsidy program, the acquisition of land, et cetera, which council made determinations on those items. The other piece of it was infrastructure within the city of Glendale and the deferment of many programs and projects that are in place and a phased approach of what that could look like through the years. And the third piece was recreation. And I think that's where the year-round aquatics program came from by way of those discussions. So we had it broken out in those categories for last year's discussion. This year, we didn't do that, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, based on the fact that, again, because of the financial constraints that we're unaware of in terms of the challenges that we're facing in the coming months and year, and knowing that we may have about $18+ million fund balance within Measure S, again, if the council desires to have a specific discussion on Measure S and allocate those funds specifically, absolutely, and we can provide that information as part of this process, or even outside of this process. It doesn't have to be as part of this process. The council can appropriate funds throughout the year based on the desires that you may have and knowing that the funding sources are available for you to be able to appropriate those funds. And so, again, we'll take that direction from the council depending on where you want to take Measure S discussion in particular.
I mean, personally, I would like, I mean, of course, not now, but I mean, maybe we can, schedule a session to discuss this. Maybe we go out and get input from the community. The one thing I want to make sure we don't do is look at this money as a plug for a budget shortfall we have in the general fund, because we've been very clear that we're not doing that. I know that's not what we want to do, and sitting on this money kind of could give the impression that, hey, we're holding this because if we have a shortfall, we want to be able to, fill it in. So we can't do that, and I think there's so much need. Let's get together and talk about what we can do. $18 million. Well, I think we should be a little conservative with that number, but I think we can deploy some of it.
I have to add, when we were studying Measure S, I was adamant to separate the money from the general budget.
Yeah.
This was long discussion. Eventually, we made an account, separate account. That Measure S money is not for the shortfall of the general budget. So that's why the money is kept in a separate account, and we have to remember that every time. This is mostly is for housing, affordable housing, land acquisition, and anyway, that was the purpose at the time. I know I was advocate of it on TV and convinced people to vote for the Measure S, and going through all that, we had only 52% agreed with the idea that to have raise the sales tax, but have that money to be used for affordable housing. That's why lots of people, they came forward to vote for it, believing that this is going to help all those people who need housing in this city.
So,
Councilmember.
so it might be a good idea, and I know this because I got part of my anatomy burned in the discussion of the ice rink. So there's specific language that we had put out to the voters on the Measure S, uses, appropriate uses. It might be a good idea just to circulate that amongst council and the community as well as to what, it wasn't just affordable housing, but that was clearly mentioned. It was for recreation, quality of life was the general, selling point. But if you could refresh, I mean, obviously, we don't want to go outside of what we told the community we were going to use it for. We have done a good job in segregating those funds and not dumping it into the general fund for backfilling pensions and salaries and everything that the community is very adverse to. But just remind us what those categories were and what we put before the voters, because I think that should be our guiding direction on that.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, I don't have the language before me, but I remember that it was quality of life and essential services was Measure S, and that was the umbrella that covered the 3/4% sales tax, of which there was a number of categories as part of those essential services and quality of life. And so you're accurate. There was a number of items listed under quality of life and essential services.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yes, Councilmember Devine.
Yeah, what I'd like to see is the process that we went through last year in the initial Measure S decisions that we made, assessing where the need is, and staff bringing back the verbiage and what exactly was the aims and the goals of this Measure S funding, and let us have a discussion, and we can just use this as kind of a template of a projection, but then bring the Measure S agenda item back to us so that we can, again, assess how we want to use it. Because we're certainly, I don't think we want to use $20 million on housing or acquiring property. I think that was a big step and a great step, but there may be other uses that we need in the community that we can be addressing this funding towards. So that would be my suggestion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, let's continue.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember Kasakian.
thank you. I want to just ask a couple of questions, and I haven't been asking either because my colleagues have asked the questions already or because I'm trying to take in this initial budget study session before I do. So we have some understanding about how much money we have through this presentation, an approximation of our expenses. But I want to know, what can we do to get a clearer picture of our projections? And in terms of, when we're talking about especially Measure S and the sales tax revenue, has staff reached out to our top sales tax generators to get more realistic picture of what the shortfall is going to be? Have we gone out proactively and taken a survey of our top 10, 15, 20, whatever it may be, revenue generators? Spoken to them directly.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, Councilmember Kasakian, no, we've not personally done that. Our consultant, HDL company, they do reach out. They do look at data that each sales tax provider is generating. So they do have the better pulse on what is actually happening in the economy. So
Are they doing it? Are they doing it in a Glendale specific way, or are they just looking at industry general figures and taking a survey of, say, folks in retail across a region?
They do look at both, and the numbers that they've provided to us are Glendale specific to our kind of demographics, to how things happen in Glendale versus across the state.
So the numbers that they are providing, though, are Glendale specific. They've done it by speaking, and we have an idea, or they have told us who they've reached out to specifically?
No, they've not told me or any of us who they've reached out to specifically, but they do look at a lot of data. I don't know who they've talked to personally.
Can we find that out?
I can ask, sure.
Okay, I'd like to know, because, all the industries are going to be impacted differently, and we need to have, as a council, an idea as to where we're going to allocate resources. And so, do we have information as to who has qualified for any of the federal, state, or PPP assistance or otherwise in the city of Glendale?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Kasakian, no, we don't have that data. I don't know if we were able to even get that at this point, but we can ask also to see.
Okay, can we find out, and even if it requires staff to go out and directly talk to some of these businesses?
We can try.
We can put out a survey
Yeah.
and see what type of information the business community would be willing to share with us outside of what we're able to get from any one of our consultants. We could see what we can provide.
Okay, because I know that our economic development team is doing a lot of outreach, and I think part of that outreach has to be getting a clear understanding of where a lot of these companies and businesses are, larger ones, smaller ones. And in addition to that, when we're talking about these Measure S funds and, what they're intended for or what they're going to do, we find ourselves in very uncertain times. And, part of the reason why we have all this funds is because of the local businesses that have helped generate this. I do realize that also the residents have contributed to a portion of this through purchasing and economic activity, which has generated it. But it would make sense to me that as we're reading news about, big companies like J.Crew and others declaring bankruptcy or on the verge of it, I'd like to see how we can also look for ways to redistribute some of these funds to help those businesses that help generate this revenue to begin with. That's not perpetually, but at least during this crisis, I think it's something that we ought to seriously consider, especially for those who have tried to receive assistance and for whatever reason, either they didn't get to it in time or for other considerations have not benefited from it. So I don't know if any of my colleagues would consider that, but if there's ways that we can, and I understand what the community had voted for the Measure S funds to be used for, but as I said, these are unique times, and we need to look for unique solutions to keep our city's economic viability intact. And I think this may be one way of doing that.
Well, Mr. Mayor, that's
Yes.
exactly why I think we should have this item, Measure S, address Measure S funding at a council meeting so that we have suggestions and ideas and have this information available to us so we can allot the funding where it's most needed by the community.
Mr. Mayor, I'd also like to say that in addition to businesses, obviously, I'd like to include in that nonprofits as well. We should know where our cities, especially the ones that are stepping up and serving those in need right now, the nonprofits, whether it's the arts, the family services, whatever it may be, we should know how they've been impacted as well. I know some have received some PPP funding, but I'd like the community and the public to know as well, so they know where we're giving out assistance, especially when it comes for other pools of resources as well. I know that we're going to also be looking at CDBG funds and others. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Flynn.
Okay, very good. Moving on to the general fund, some projects for council to consider where staff needs some direction. We have 3 listed on this slide. And I'll just quickly go over them. The Hoover Pool, I'm sorry.
Mr. Mayor, briefly on this, before we have discussion on these 3 projects, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
Councilor Najarian has to.
Okay,
step out
so
as it
I
relates to-
have my wife has a residence which is within 500 feet of the Verdugo Wash,
Yeah.
and due to conflict of interest rules, regulations, I will recuse myself from this discussion, and give me a holler when
Yeah.
I
So my
can come
suggestion
back
is
in.
for him to step out, have the discussion on that project, and then have
First.
first, and then then we can bring him back and then have the
Okay.
discussion on the other 2 projects.
I'll just go into planning and
Yeah.
see what they're doing.
And Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, as Ms. Flynn was going to cover these 3 items with you, of which we will take up the Verdugo Wash Bikeway feasibility study first, in no way are these the only items for council consideration, but these are items that have come up a number of times in the last fiscal year, if not longer, based on either interest from community groups and organizations, council, the state legislature, et cetera. And so wanted to make sure that we have them highlighted here so that we can get that feedback from the council directly as to whether you do want us to look at any one of these items and move forward with them. And the Verdugo Wash Bikeway feasibility study, since Councilmember Najarian stepped out, we'll talk about that one first. That's something that has come up a number of times. We've received a number of letters from very specific organizations within the community, outside of the community, community members, and the city council. So wanted to see where council's thoughts were in the policy direction on this item.
Thank you.
I have a qu-
Councilmember
Mr. Mayor?
Devine. Councilmember Devine.
Yes, as far as the Verdugo Wash Bikeway feasibility study, I think it's worth a study. I think it's an interesting project, and we have gotten a lot of support from Supervisor Barger, elected officials, state and local. So I would be in favor of supporting the feasibility study for the Verdugo Wash Bikeway. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Time out. I have a question, a legal question.
Ms.
Sure.
Councilmember Brockman.
Councilmember Najarian lives further from the Verdugo Wash than I do, I think.
It's not his house, it's a separate property owned by his spouse.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. I was just going to point out also, Mr. Mayor, you have 2 speakers that are calling in to speak on the Verdugo
Quick, we
Wash.
go to the callers. You are on the air with City Council and Mayor.
Hello.
Yes.
Hi, this is Paul Rabinov. I'm calling in to make a comment regarding the Verdugo Wash.
Please. You may do it at this time.
Thank you, sir. Greetings, Mr. Mayor, council members, and staff. My name is Paul Rabinov, and I would like to express gratitude for your leadership and service to our community during this unprecedented time. Your willingness to assume these responsibilities demonstrates courage and commitment to everyone you have been elected to serve. The city budget for next year is going to be considerably affected, and I want to express support for the inclusion of the Verdugo Wash feasibility study within it. The world is being altered by our present experience, and it's important to consider how our region can adapt and improve moving forward. For decades, the Wash has served the vital role of flood control. We now have an opportunity to reconsider our relationship to it and explore what additional benefits for the community, the environment, and the economy can be created by maintaining the aspects needed to continue the flood safety it provides. I know all of you received an email which expressed the support this project has from stakeholders, elected officials, and civic organizations, as well as community members. Also attached to that email was a PowerPoint presentation which conceptually outlined its various facets. I will only point out here one page which describes the benefits, many of which can qualify for outside funding. The concept of a greenway running through the city poses tremendous opportunities to create additional park and open space, including in communities which have been identified as disadvantaged. In so doing, it can enhance the health and well-being of residents and people who come to work and play here. It can create connectivity and provide alternative means to get around the city, along with better access to various destinations such as schools, neighborhoods, and parks, including Glendale Riverwalk and Griffith Park, both of which presently are quite difficult to get to other than by motor vehicle. It has opportunities for stormwater retention, CO2 emissions and heat island reductions, and habitat restoration. Economic benefits can be had both by neighborhoods and businesses adjacent to the Wash and also to the city at large through the creation of a desirable destination for all. This is the time when we all must look forward and ask what kind of a future we want to create. Choices we make now will help determine what Glendale will look like for years to come. The Verdugo Wash can play a very important and positive role. Thank you for this opportunity to speak and for your leadership during these difficult times.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, you are on the air with City Council and the Mayor.
Presently are quite difficult to get to other than by motor vehicle.
Lower your,
Opportunities for stormwater retention, CO2
please
emissions,
lower
and
your,
That's Paul.
your volume
economic
and
benefits can
connect.
be had both by neighborhoods and businesses.
You are
adjacent to
on
Wash
the
and also
air.
to the
Oh, that's the last
to the
caller.
creation of a desirable destination
This is
for all.
new caller,
Delay.
We almost look
but
forward to
they are
asking
watching
what we
the
want to create.
proceeding,
Choices we
the
make now will
TV.
help
That's
determine
why
what Glendale
they're
will look like for
unaware
years
that
to
I'm
come.
calling them.
The Verdugo
You are
Wash
on
play
the
a
air.
very important and positive role.
Sorry,
No.
you are on the air with Mayor and City Council members.
Hi, my name is Alec Bartrosov. I'm a homeowner in Glendale. I just wanted to express my support for the Verdugo Wash feasibility study. I think certain members of the community have certainly done their due diligence in expressing to you all the support that's coming in for a project like this. I think when it comes to recreation and bicycle and walking facilities, Glendale has a long way to go, and this is an excellent opportunity for the city to pursue an opportunity like this to create such a benefit that everybody in the city of Glendale can benefit from. So thank you for considering the project.
Thank you. You are on the air with Mayor and City Council members.
Hello, thank you, Mayor and City Councilors. My name is Star Simpson. I am a resident of Glendale. I enjoy driving, biking, and walking in Glendale, and I'm calling to express my support for the feasibility study of the Verdugo Wash pedestrian and cycle path. I have actually bicycled that route myself in the current state, and I would appreciate the opportunity to make that same journey feeling more safe if it were adapted for cyclists and pedestrians. Thank you.
Thank you. You are on the air.
Hi, my name is Dr. Henry Schlinger. I represent Drive Safe Glendale, over 1,500 Glendale residents who signed a change.org petition to address the serious traffic problems in the city. And I'm calling to support the City Council's plan to study the traffic problems and hope they go further than studying it and actually institute some issues to address the serious problems of driving in our neighborhoods.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You are on the air with Mayor and City Council members. Hello.
Hello. Hello?
Yes. You are on the
This
air.
is Mayor Agajanian.
Yes.
Hi, Mayor Agajanian and City Council members. My name is Nerses Aposhian. I've been a resident of Glendale for about 25 years now. My question isn't about necessarily the Verdugo Wash, but it's something you discussed earlier, which was the budget and some of the businesses there. And one of my questions is about the Brand Boulevard of Cars and the impact that that will have on property taxes that are going to be collected, and what will be done instead if we do see a decline in sales. So I'm curious about that, and if there are any plans to remedy that.
So, so are you done with your question?
Sorry?
Are you finished?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. You are on the air with Mayor and City Council members.
The budget and some of the businesses there.
Yeah. Lower the volume of your TV or computer, please. Lower the volume or go away from the unit. Go away from the unit, then you can connect. You're on the air.
Hi, this is Eric Hovland. I'm a resident of Glendale, and my residence abuts the wash. I wanted to call to support the study for the Verdugo Wash turning into green space and a place for cyclists and pedestrians. I'm a regular bicycle commuter, and I often walk through my neighborhood, and it would be an incredible improvement to Glendale if this area was made accessible for cyclists and pedestrians. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello, you're on the air. Hello. You are on the air with City Council members and Mayor.
Hello.
Yes.
Hi, this is Carrie Field. I'm calling in to agree with the previous callers. I support the Verdugo Wash study, and I hope that you guys will proceed with that. My family uses the LA River path often, and it's really enjoyable. It'd be really nice if we could connect and ride both rivers or both areas, and also because it doesn't feel safe riding bikes on Glendale streets. It would provide a way to get exercise and get outside without having to be around some of the crazy drivers, which is why I'm also going to call. I'm calling and getting ahead of the next thing you're going to discuss, the traffic study, which I'm also in support of. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello, you are on the air.
Hi, yes. Good morning, Honorable Mayor, City Council, and underappreciated staff. My name is Dave Deuce. I live in the Glendale area. I want to thank you for the online access to the meetings. I'm wishing to voice my support for the Verdugo Wash Greenway plan connecting the urban trail from the LA River to the Glendale Community College. Furthermore, I request the tributaries and appropriate easements that feed into the Verdugo Wash be included in the development plan. Hulls, Pickens, Eagle washes. Even if the funds may be limited for these additional trails, the inclusion of them in the Verdugo Greenway plan would allow for local organizations to step up and make progress in linking and connecting some of these easier sections. The benefits, as Paul mentioned earlier, are innumerable. Reduction in car use and parking needs, healthier community, closer to and more appreciative of nature, higher walkability scores, increasing property values. Many of these spaces are currently an eyesore, and sidewalks in this area have a tendency just to stop. In summary, permission is half the battle. Please consider adding Hulls, Pickens, Eagle washes to the Verdugo Greenway study. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You are on the air.
Hi, my name is Kent Bullard. I'm a resident of Spar Heights in Glendale. I've lived here for about 23 years. I served as an active member for a number of years on the Glendale Trail Safety Patrol Program in the mountain biking unit. And a portion of the Verdugo Wash runs very close to the Spar Heights neighborhood where I live. And I just, every time that I'm around it and I'm crossing over it to get up to the Verdugo Mountain, it just is such an obvious example of an improvement that would really benefit the area. And the concept of being able to connect different city parks, like the park up in Crescenta Valley with the Verdugo Park, and then extending down through the city and all the way to Griffith Park. For someone who enjoys bicycle riding, it just seems like an absolutely a no-brainer. It's just a great opportunity for the city. And I know times are tough right now, but you're talking about a feasibility study right now, and this is going to be a long project. And I think that, you know, when we emerge from all of this difficulty and the COVID-related crisis, you know, this would be something to really look forward to for the community, to have a bike path and walking path and jogging path like that running through this area and all the way down through the rest of Glendale. So I really hope that the City Council moves forward with the feasibility study, and that we see, you know, where this can take us, and that we get that bike path in eventually as something to really look forward to for the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You are on the air?
Mayor Agajanian?
Yes.
My name is Herbert Molano, members of the City Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on the budget study session.
Thank you.
I had a couple of questions to ask and a couple of observations. I was wondering how many hours are being allocated by the City Council for the budget study session. And I was wondering whether the time that the City Council is allocating towards the budget, whether it's that commensurate with the budget items. So that, for example, if you're discussing something in the area of $50 million, that a commensurate amount of time is placed on that budget item, so that at least the important items on the budget can be addressed with sufficient time. Sometimes I seem to see that items that are on a very low amount take a significant amount of your time during this study session. And I would like to see that more, at the time allocated, be relevant to the size of the budget item being discussed. The second thing I wanted to mention about is that in looking at the operational budget for the 2021 year, that maybe it would be a good idea to compare it to the last few years that appears on the CAFR. The Comprehensive Annual Financial Report gives a beautiful summary for the past few years, and looking at those trends might give you a more relevant picture as to what can be, what have been the trends, especially those increases in revenues and increases in expenses. And maybe that may give you a way of perceiving the budget in light of the changes that we have had in the last 5 to 7 years. And one more item, it's an observation that, for example, the professional organizations like the Hotel and Lodging, American Hotel and Lodging Association, provides reports that are available online, and they show a projected decrease in revenues for the rest of 2020 of 50%. And those associations might be a good source of information for you to determine what may be the expected losses from professionals who are looking at the industry themselves. And I just thought that might be a relevant way for you to look at the projected losses in revenues coming up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Molano. Okay. I guess are we done with this Verdugo Wash Bikeway feasibility study?
Could I make a
If we can get direction, Mr. Mayor, on this one item in terms of council's.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Sorry.
Councilmember Kasakian.
No worries.
Yeah, we are listening.
Are these items, well, first of all, I know that there was a lot of talk about the Verdugo Wash, but my own personal feeling is that given the size of the cost of the Hoover Pool project, although I think it's very necessary, and I've been an advocate for the collaboration for projects such as this between ourselves and the school, given that, the school's not going anywhere, we're facing a crisis, I would like to see this item be put on hold for the time being. The other two items I think are necessary and I'm supportive of. But I'd like to know, can we pay for these? Are these the types of things that we could pay for through Measure S Measure S funding.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, Councilmember Kasakian, you can allocate these items to be paid for through Measure S. Both the traffic study and the Verdugo Wash are one-time expenditures and can be paid for through Measure S if that is the direction of the City Council.
I personally would like to see that, given the amount of them. And one more question, the Verdugo Wash feasibility study, we say $250,000, but will it cost $250,000? Could we have phases of that? Is there a bronze package, silver package, a gold package that we could consider, or is it just one $250,000 expense?
That's a very good question, Councilmember Kasakian. Initially, our estimates were $400,000 to $500,000 for this study, based on staff looking at what this feasibility study could look like and to do it in its totality. What I understand from community development and from Assistant City Manager Rubik Galanian in terms of being involved in this project, it would cost the $250,000, give or take, for us to be able to do a full feasibility study of the area. And we would suggest doing the entire thing all at once, so we have a good understanding if we're going to move forward with that item.
Thank you. Yes, Councilmember.
Is Councilmember Kasakian finished? Yeah.
Yes.
So I just want to express my support for the study, Verdugo Wash, what are we calling it? The Verdugo Wash Bikeway. Actually, I think we should probably talk about a greenway, because I really think it is, we should think of it as a park, as a very narrow and long park that would run through the city and that would give access to park space to a lot of people that don't have it now. It's, certainly a lot more than bicycling. So I'm totally in favor.
Thank you. Okay.
Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember Devine.
Yes, thank you. I think I've already expressed my support of this feasibility study. I think eventually, if the study comes back and it's worth the effort and the funding, we can take that in steps. I do question the Hoover Pool collaboration, because I think we need to speak to the Glendale Unified if they're even thinking about in this particular time and place, moment in time, if they're even thinking about the Hoover Pool project. So that's my opinion. I'm for the traffic study and the bikeway feasibility study, and not so much on the Hoover Pool collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you. Are we done with Verdugo Wash Bikeway feasibility study that we can bring Councilmember Najarian back? Or
If you have any comments, sir, on Verdugo Wash, it's up to you, but
we are done.
you're done?
I think.
Okay,
So
so,
Yes.
that was the only item that
yes,
Councilmember Najarian should.
that's right. And he
Okay.
can come back.
Then, may I ask, does this stay on the proposed budget, Mayor?
Yes, please.
Does the Verdugo Wash study,
Hold on.
has that
At this point,
prevailed?
yes, we have 3 council members who have provided direction based on the information provided. We would have this as part of the budget. And if I heard Councilmember Kasakian correctly, he suggested the possibility of paying for this by way of Measure S.
I did not agree to that.
No, I understand. I'm just, absolutely. So again, that's up to the council in terms of how you want to pay for it.
We have to discuss at a later time. Okay.
I have a question, Mr.
Councilmember-
Mayor, for the city attorney regarding my conflict. So am I not allowed to express the concerns of my wife regarding this project, which could potentially take her backyard away from her? Is she silenced in this, or am I not allowed to help her either on a phone call or to speak as a member of the public?
Right. Mr. Mayor, members of council, Councilmember Najarian. So under the FPPC conflict of interest rules, you could only participate to speak out on behalf of your interest if nobody else could speak to that, because this is your spouse's interest. The law presumes that she can speak to it, she can come to council, she can write to council. It would only be if there was something that was your interest only. So, for example, if it was actually your house and your house only, then the law would provide that you could step down from the dais, so to speak, and speak to the council. But it's not yours, it's your spouse's. The right to speak on it is hers under the law. The only time that a council member who has a conflict can speak as to their financial interest is when nobody else can speak to it. So if it was a business interest, it's presumed that your partners or whatever, a council member's partners could come and speak to it. Unfortunately, yeah, you would not be able to speak to it.
That seems a little unfair that she would not be able to.
She would, but you can't.
That she would not be able to hire me or ask me as a member of the bar. So she's not allowed any legal representation in this? If she has an eminent domain action, I can't represent her in it?
She's certainly entitled to legal representation.
But not me?
But not you. There's another 200,000 lawyers in the state that could represent.
Yeah, but she wants to pick the best. Seriously? I mean,
That's
I'm
the law.
out of this totally, and
Yes, sir.
are we sure of that? Are we 100%
The only thing we could do,
sure? Can we look at that?
We could ask the FPPC for an opinion.
You can
to see-
always register as a lobbyist.
We could always request a formal opinion from the FPPC to see whether there are any exceptions to the 500-foot rule, because there are some exceptions. We just don't think
Right.
that they apply. But
So I am conflicted,
Correct.
but it's not my property, it's my wife's.
right. So any decision that affects your financial interest or those of your spouse or your dependent children,
But if it was my property, I could speak to it,
if it was your property and your property alone,
and my property alone.
right?
I mean, I'm concerned about that. This is not the time for the
Right.
discussion.
We can have a discussion about that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Right now, I would like to read name of the people who are here. As a person on TV every day, usually I watch different proceeding or something going on TV, then I don't know what these people are doing there. So I'm sure there are lots of our viewers, they're watching this proceeding and say, what these people are doing, these guys or ladies are doing here. So I want to read the name of the people who are present in this chamber. Yasmin Bir, city manager, is present. Of course, my colleagues, Council Member Najarian and Brotman are in this chamber. And on phone, Council Member Kasakian and Divine are on phone. So Mike Garcia, city attorney, is in here. Rubik Golanian, assistant city manager, is sitting in the back. I wish we could see them too, so this way they know whom I am talking about. If our cameraman could show the chamber, would be better than showing me at this moment. John Taktalian, deputy city. I guess they're not listening to me, Mr. Right. So if you could show the chamber is better than showing me, those who are behind the camera. Anyway, John Taktalian is here. Aram Ajemian is here, sitting in the back. Steve Zern, general manager of GWP, is in here. Phil Lanzafame, community development director, I guess is on phone. Yes, or another room. Silvio Lanzas, fire chief, is here in the chamber. Carl Povolides, police chief, is in here. Elena Bolbolian, innovation, performance, and audit director, is in here. Michelle Flynn, finance director, is sitting in front. Jason Bradford, chief information officer, is present in here. Yazdan Imrani, a public works director, is here. Gary Schaefer, library, arts, and culture director, is present. Matt Doyle, Human Resource Director, is here, maybe. So this way they know who you are, because especially if they have masks, it's hard to know who's who. Onik Bulanikian, Community Service and Park Director, is present. Rafi Manukian, former City Council member and City Treasurer with all those money, is present. Adrin Isayan, Deputy Finance Director, is present. Mary Karamian, Budget Manager, is here. Yeah. Anaid Magardichian is here, Administrative Assistant. And who else? Did I left out anybody who's here and I didn't read the name? Okay. So now you know who is in here and why they are here. Thank you. What's next, please?
The traffic study, Mr. Najarian is now part of the discussion, is one of the items that we too have also heard about throughout the last year from the City Council, and we did inform the council that we would have this as part of the budget discussion. And as stated very well by Councilmember Kasakian and Devine, in terms of the Hoover Pool, at this time, that's why we had an asterisk next to it. It's something that has come up over the last 2 years, and we have had discussions, a number of discussions with GUSD, but we would like to bring a standalone report on the Hoover Pool project and the possibility of a partnership with GUSD on this project, but that would be down the road, not at this time, Mr. Mayor. And so with that, we'd like to get some feedback from all of you on the traffic study as well as the Hoover Pool.
I have some comments on the traffic study, if I might.
Councilmember Broad.
Thank you. So we did talk a lot during the last campaign about traffic in Glendale and the fact that we hadn't done a citywide traffic circulation study in many, many years. So I think it's appropriate that we do that. We all said that we wanted that. But my understanding of that was primarily around traffic congestion and understanding our traffic flows and what we can do to address congestion. I think there's a larger and I would say more important question, which one of the callers, I think two of the callers mentioned just previously, which is traffic safety or pedestrian safety, I should say. And I would like to make sure that when we look at traffic, we're looking at it holistically. We're especially looking at this issue of speeding and what we can do with road design and technology, traffic calming technology. We've talked about cameras. We've talked about maybe different new technologies that we can consider. How we design our roads really matters for whether people feel like they can drive at or above the speed limit. So there's sometimes things you can do with lane widths and other things that could slow down traffic. We also do need to look at enforcement because we know that we have been down, and I know how difficult it is to bring motor officers onto the force, but I think there is a strong sense in the community that we need to be doing better enforcement. It may not just be with people, it could be a combination of people and technology, but we should look at that. And then finally, a real kind of education outreach effort to impress on people that, speeding, drag racing isn't cool. There are a lot of things that are cool, but that's not one of them. And we got to get, especially younger people to not see that as an activity that, you go out and you prove your worth by racing up and down Glen Oaks Boulevard. So that's what I would want to say about that. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, what's next? Oh, Councilmember Najari.
So I do support the traffic study, but let's see if we can get Metro to pay for it. So work with me on this. especially as we look at the BRT and we're looking at those routes and maybe the streetcar study, that'll at least cover part of the downtown area. And those are already going, those projects are already going. And if we can keep our eyes open on opportunities for other funding, I mean, 500,000 is like nothing for Metro, even though they are severely impacted with this COVID issue. But Yazdan, let's sort of think how we can get our goals accomplished by this study, and it involves everything, whether it's an active transportation grant or something like that, that would help us get to where we want to get with street design and pedestrian safety and speeding and traffic calming and all that. So I support it, and we should probably reserve this money, but let's see if we can get Metro to help us with that.
Thank you. So what's next, please?
And is the council comfortable with putting the Hoover on hold for this time period, and we would have the discussion when
Yeah.
a full report comes back to the
I am.
council?
Yes.
Okay, sure.
All right, great. We'll move on to our,
Is this the, can I have the floor for a second?
Yes, please.
Is this the appropriate time to kind of talk about some of the other things we discussed?
Sure.
Yasmin?
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to, since we are talking about projects, and I have a long wish list, but I've scaled it back. And, understanding the financial situation we're in, but I want to at least get these on the table. So one of them is we certainly want to come back to the Greener Glendale plan. And I know we've discussed that, and we have a plan to bring on a chief sustainability officer and do that. So I would just want to make sure that as we think about the budget, we have room for that. And I'm sure that's not an inexpensive item, but LA County has done a very thorough sustainability plan, and it's kind of modular. They've designed it in a way that other cities can actually take some of what they've done, and I think they've already done some greenhouse gas inventory modeling, so we can definitely leverage what they've done and maybe reduce the cost. We also have our citywide bicycle master plan that we did in 2012, and we said in that plan we would revisit it after 5 years. And, it's now been 7 years, so I think we need to come back, relook at the citywide bicycle master plan, update it. We've done a lot, but we've done a lot based on Sharrows, which is kind of, old school now for bicycle infrastructure, so we need to kind of modernize where we are with that. And another thing I want to mention that I think is very, very important is, and I know is basically city resilience and disaster recovery planning. Now, Ms. Beers, you mentioned that we're bringing on an emergency manager. I think that's great, and I think there is a need for us to be thinking about all the things that could be hitting us, including let's say a long-term power interruption, fires, floods, all the things, and really understand where our critical infrastructure is, how do we protect it, and how do we get communities involved? I think there's a real yearning in the communities to move into emergency response teams and neighborhood watch, and really coming together at the micro level to know who's who in the neighborhood, who's got medical issues, who's got pets, who's a doctor, and in Glen Oaks Canyon, they've done a lot of good work organizing themselves in that way, and I think we really should work on spreading that out into other neighborhoods and get people engaged in their own future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I can just,
Please.
for the record, respond to Councilmember Brotman's statements on the Greener Glendale plan and the bicycle master plan, or any of the plans that may be before us in the coming fiscal year and/or fiscal years. Those items will be before the council at different times within the fiscal year, and council at that time can appropriate funding for specific programs and projects. At times, it will be grant-related. At times, it will be funds from within the city, whether it's general fund or other funds. But most definitely, we will be before the city council for such appropriations in the coming year on, in particular, the Greener Glendale Plan. And we do have a study session scheduled for the bicycle and pedestrian plan coming up soon. And depending on how that goes and the information needed and what we need to do next, there may be some appropriations that will need to happen as a part of that. And the resiliency and emergency planning, something that has always been a priority for this council and the community. We are in the process of hiring a manager for emergency operations. We had one some time ago, and we haven't had one now for some time, but that work has not been undone. Pieces of it have been done by way of the police department, the fire department, and all the departments, but you do need someone who is actually responsible in carrying all of those priorities forward. And as soon as that individual is hired and is on board, I think many of the things that have been slightly on the back burner, we will be able to move forward on, and in particular, the neighborhood types of watches and the CERT program and updating many of our plans. So that's also forthcoming and very important.
Thank you. Little bit earlier, I read 23 names who are present here. I realized it's hard to say whose name I read and whose name didn't read, but I realized that I didn't mention the name of Eliza Papazian, who is our public information officer, is present too. Isn't she? No. Okay, I'm sorry.
You're tripping, Mayor.
Okay, I'm wrong. Then I accept.
It's hard to see with the masks on to identify the lady.
But she's with us, Mr. Mayor, because she's been definitely texting me information, so
Okay.
I'm sure
Thank
she's
you.
happy that you
So
mentioned
we'll
her name.
go on and continue our discussion.
Thank you.
I'm trying to get the slides to advance here, and it's not working.
Aram, can you make it go?
Right. Say again?
There we go.
There you go.
Okay, moving on to our organizational profile. This is the part of the study session today that we look at a citywide view, and in some cases, down to the general fund level. And we're doing some comparisons, whether it be from this current fiscal year adopted to our proposed for next year. And then later in the presentation, we do some Tri-City comparisons with our neighbors, Burbank and Pasadena. So on slide 21, we show our citywide organizational profile in the various sectors that we provide service in. This is a citywide view, so the general fund is a portion of this, but all other funds are in here as well. Public Works and Utilities is being the largest because that's where the vast majority of our capital infrastructure projects lie. And then that represents about 55% in total of our city general fund, citywide budget of what's going to be about $866 million. You will see the details of all of that coming to you next week at the study session where we look at all the departments' budgets and all fund budgets. Moving on to slide 22 is comparison, again, between this current fiscal year's adopted budget to next year's proposed budget for our total population. We haven't gotten updated numbers yet from the State Department of Finance. As soon as we get that, we can update this slide. We also have our comparison between our citywide authorized full-time positions. We are down one position that we eliminated during the year. General fund authorized full-time positions has a slight change as well. And then our adopted budget and general fund budget. Residents served per full-time across all funds is 130, and that's consistent for both years, as well as within the general fund is the same number of 227. And then the budget per capita of all funds for this current fiscal year is 4,549, and for next year, 4,304. And in the general fund is very consistent, just over $1,100 for each year. Okay, slide 23, we're doing a tri-city comparison here with our neighbors of Burbank and Pasadena. We look at our total population. This is for fiscal year 1920. Total population, you can see Glendale is the largest, Pasadena second largest, and Burbank is about just less than, a little bit more than half of our total. Our total citywide employees, this is full-time equivalents. So this includes part-time and hourly positions equated to a full-time status. So for Glendale, it's 1,919. Burbank is 1,430, and Pasadena, 2,273. And then you can see how that breaks down for our budget as well across all three cities. And then residents served per full-time equivalent citywide and within the general fund. Glendale definitely has the higher number there, and as same with our per capita budget. I'm sorry, not the same as per capita budget. I was looking at residents served for the general fund. Our per capita budget is there as well, and we are the lowest for the general fund as well as citywide.
So we're the leanest and the meanest between our neighboring cities.
I wouldn't say meanest, but yeah.
Efficient.
Yes.
Leanest, most cost-effective, and most efficient.
Thank you.
Slide 24 gives you another tri-city comparison. This is for fiscal year 18-19, so it's the end of last fiscal year where we are looking at our reserve percentages in the general fund, and we don't have this current fiscal year's data yet for all funds for the other cities, so that's why we went to previous year, and you can see what those percentages are. Where Glendale is pretty much right in between Burbank and Pasadena.
Thank you. I may stop here for a second because Assemblymember Laura Friedman is on the phone. Apparently, I didn't know she was, while we were discussing Verdugo Wash, so she has comments, I guess.
Verdugo Wash? I have to leave again?
No. Which was the item.
And just so you know, Mr. Mayor, there was another speaker that called in over Verdugo Wash, but we had informed him that we were done with the discussion, so it's up to you whether we move forward. But I do feel bad that we shooed that speaker away.
Yeah,
Should I?
Verdugo
It's up to you, Mr. Mayor, but Mr. Najarian would probably have to step out.
So I can take the phone?
Yes, while he steps out.
Okay, sorry. Assemblymember, you are on the phone. Thank you for calling us.
Hello, this is Victoria from Assemblymember Laura Friedman's office. I'm so sorry the Assemblymember is in Sacramento and she couldn't join at the moment. But good morning, Honorable Mayor Agajanian, council members, and city staff. My name is Victoria Doshogalian, and I am Assemblymember Laura Friedman's Glendale field representative. The Assemblymember wanted to express her support for the funding of the Verdugo Wash project. The Assemblymember has been a long advocate and ally for active transit in our district. She has been a supporter of this project from its genesis, as it will significantly improve our community's health access, recreation, open space, and local economy. Ms. Friedman admires your efforts in interweaving existing park space with multimodal transit options as we work on transitioning our urban mobility from car dependency to active transit in our state. We hope your family and loved ones are healthy, and thank you for continuously working on keeping our constituents safe in the city of Glendale. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you for calling. Okay. So,
Galanian, can you get?
Councilmember Najarian, you can come back.
Okay, I'll just go on to slide 25. Slide 25 gives you a general fund budget reduction history. We've listed out here about 10, 11 years worth of reductions across all the departments within the general fund. For each year, the years, where you see nothing, that basically meant that there were no reductions taken in that year. And This was just basically for some historical information on the differences, the different things that we've done in the general fund over the years. Moving on to slide 26, another historical view of our authorized full-time position count going back to fiscal year 2005 and 6, where we had 1,995 employees, and then through the years you can see the changes that we've made, and part of that is translated from slide 25, where we had some eliminations for retirement incentives, and then down to where we have our proposed number for fiscal year 2021 of 1,584 positions.
Sorry, I have a question on that.
Of course.
So this is the full-time position. How about the part-time position previously in years 2005, 6, 7, 8? Because a little bit earlier you said when we convert the part-time to full-time position, there was a number of 1,900 people are employed,
That's
did you
correct.
say?
Yes.
Which chart
That's
was
on
that?
slide 23. When we convert part-time and hourlies to full-time equivalents, our total is 1,919. So that includes everybody, all of our part-time and
All right,
hourlies,
so
as well as
why we
full-time.
don't compare that also?
We're also in the process of putting that together. Councilman Brotman had asked for that yesterday,
Oh.
so we're in the process of putting that together. I don't believe we have that history all the way back as far as this
No,
slide shows, but we will put together what we do
No, I
have.
mean, if we are comparing something, if you have 1,584 full-time, and we have 500 the part-times converts to 500 of full-time employees, and in year 2016 or 2013, you had more full-time and less of a part-time, then we can't compare. So that's
Exactly.
why it should be next to it, tabulated from the time which you have. Like say if it's 2011 or whenever the document or the information is available, so then I can compare.
Understood. We are putting that together for
Thank
you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah,
Let me follow up on your discussion. So it's more than just adding up hours to get to 40, and that becomes a 40 per week, and that's a FTE, because there's pension load and all that other that a full-time gets that the part-timers don't get.
In some cases, that's true.
So how
If-
do you make that conversion? I mean, do two 20-hour-a-week workers equal one FTE 40-hour-a-week?
Yes, we look at, in order to convert to the full-time equivalent, it is based on that. The dollars are different. The dollars, if somebody works 1,000, I believe, hours, then they are PERSable, so we do have to pay for PERS. If they're hired to stay on longer than a short period of time to fill a shortfall or a seasonal type employee, then we do have to pay for PERS. So cost-wise, that's different, but the count, yes, it's exactly as you said.
And oftentimes what happens is, as Ms. Flynn mentioned, the seasonal piece, the number of hours come together to make the one full-time equivalent position. And so the full-time count may not equate to, in terms of comparative analysis, to the dollars. But we can most definitely go back in history and see what we can put together for you to at least get a number sense of where we are today in comparison to previous years.
And one other question.
Yes, please.
So we faced this severe economic downturn, 2008, and for the few years following. It was the decision of council and the city manager at that time. I guess it was, did we have Ochoa on in 2012?
Yes.
Yes.
2000.
Yeah.
Right. So it was our decision not to furlough, not to let go, but to put in the hiring freeze. And we sweetened the pot with retirement incentives. But if we only do a hiring freeze going forward, how much can we expect a reduction in our FTEs per year? How many retirees do we have each year that that aren't critical to backfill? critical. I assume it's public safety officers and what, but
So historically speaking, the number of retirements that we have on an annual basis is anywhere between 50 and 70, depending on the year and depending if we are speaking safety, which years the safety personnel came on, which class they are a part of, et cetera. And Matt Doyle is here and he can correct me if some of my numbers are off. But 50 to 70, again, depending on the year and the number of people that may retire. And within an organization, we are a living organization, so outside of retirements, you are going to have people who are going to either leave based on personal circumstances or other jobs that they have been able to obtain, or they may be moving, et cetera, life circumstances that may occur. At any given point, we have anywhere between 50 and 80 vacancies within the general fund and over 100 vacancies overall within all funds. There are essential services that we look at when we are in either a soft hiring freeze or even a very specific kind of hardline hiring freeze, where we do allow the movement of certain positions based on policy directives from council and or just essential services such as police, fire, which includes not just police officers and firefighters, but includes dispatchers, et cetera, jailers, and whatnot. And frontline staff within our public works departments, integrated waste, streets, Glendale Water and Power in terms of linemen from the electric side and the water side. And so again, depending on what those numbers are, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, is dependent upon which ones we would move forward with and which ones we wouldn't. Based on our initial analysis of what we have vacant today and the ones that we are moving forward into 2021, we anticipate a $5 million, almost a $5 million savings, about $4.7 or $8 million savings from vacancies. If we have and continue the hiring freeze for an extended period of time, not the entire year, but an extended period of time, and for us to be able to make a determination of whether we would release any of those positions or not. So we're looking at about a $5 million savings from vacancies moving forward. Long way to answer it, I apologize, but I think I was thinking out loud as I was going through the process. So my apologies.
Thank you. Thank you. So we continue.
Yes, and the last slide for you is the budget calendar, and I just wanted to touch on the budget calendar, Mayor Agajanian. Today we covered, as you know, the financial impacts of COVID-19, the general fund update in terms of 1920, our general fund proposed budget for 2021. We had a short discussion on Measure S, the possibility of consideration of certain projects moving forward, and the organizational profile. Next week, again, we are scheduled for 9 a.m. Here in these chambers on the 12th of May. And you will have departmental presentations, which is a very quick dashboard of number of employees per department, what their M&O, maintenance and operation, and salaries and benefits, and any capital looks like for each department. And any highlights in terms of some of the highlights moving forward into 2021 looks like for them. Capital Improvement Program, the new funding sources that will be allocated to the Capital Improvement Program moving forward into 2021, and very short conversation related to the fee schedule because there are not too many changes within the fee schedule, so we have a few slides on that for the May 12th. On the 19th, initially, we were going to do the budget hearing and adoption, but based on my conversation with the mayor yesterday, we are going to push that to June 2nd to give a little bit of time in between, so we would not have that discussion on the 19th. And based on what I heard also from the council today, my suggestion would be to, on the 19th in the morning, bring back a discussion related to Measure S, so that we can spend a little bit of time that morning specifically on Measure S, council's direction on Measure S, and then on the 2nd of June, that evening at 6 p.m. would be the budget hearing and adoption. So that would be our suggestion, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, moving forward with the budget calendar.
Thank you. Is there any question? or, anyway, this was a special public meeting of City Council, and is there a question by council members?
I have some macro comments, but
Okay.
I want to make sure my
Councilmember
colleagues
Brock.
that are on WebEx are able to speak, because it's easier for us here in the chamber. So I want to give them the chance first, but I have some kind of overview comments to make.
Okay, you may make it.
Okay, all right. So, as you know, a number of us have alluded to, I think my main concern here is that I believe we're basing this budget on a very rosy scenario for how COVID-19 is going to play out through the economy. And I do want to mention, because we rely, I guess, pretty extensively on HDL and their input when we put together the budget. So I looked at, HDL's report, and I just want to read a few things, and I'm doing this because this is what gives me concern. So they say that the forecast that they're providing assumes that statewide shelter in place will continue until the end of May. Their forecast assumes the virus will have run its course by the end of September, and it does not consider a return of the virus and potential economic impacts after the current period at this time. That concerns me because I think any public health official you talk to and any economist you talk to believes that we are going to see multiple waves. We'll open up. We'll probably have to shelter again. We'll open up. We'll have to shelter again. And this thing is going to go on for quite a long time. So the fact that HDL is providing this to us on the basis of an assumption that we're out of the woods by September really concerns me. I would add, I looked at the economic analysis that the underlying macroeconomic analysis that they base some of their work on, which is Beacon Economics. And I'll read what Beacon Economics says in the report. It says, it's by no means fait accompli that the U.S. economy is about to fall into a recession of any scale, much less a major one. I really think that's an outlier. I don't think there are any economists, well, I can never say any, but I don't think there are many economists that believe we are not already in a recession and that it will not be a severe one. This gives me pause, and I would really strongly suggest that we at least prepare more of a doomsday, which I think is more of a realistic budget, and think through what the implications are if we have a U-shaped recovery, not a V-shaped recovery, and if we have multiple shelter-in-place scenarios over the coming year. I think it's our responsibility to put that on the table now. And I know you don't, Ms. Beers, want to overreact. I understand that. And I should say, as I meant to start off with this, I want to say thank you to Ms. Flynn and the whole team. This has got to be the most difficult budget, maybe since 2008. I've done budgets before. I've never done a budget under this kind of circumstance. So my hat's off to you. It must be extraordinarily challenging. And you're going, it's like you're driving blind, right? You're driving with something covering your windshield. So this has nothing to do with the work you've done. I just want that to be clear. But I really do believe it's better to, what do they say, prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And I would like to see that mapped out. And what does that mean for our staff? And I know nobody wants to talk about furloughs, nobody wants to talk about any of this stuff, but I think we need to realistically consider what the implications are. And that's what I want to get across.
Thank you. I guess we came to the end of this session of our meeting, and I would like to thank every employees of ours, starting from City Manager Yasmin Beers, Mike Garcia, City Attorney, and Michelle Flynn, Finance Director. Thank you all, and everybody else who was in here. And may I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Do I have?
Second.
Okay. So the meeting is adjourned at 11:32 p.m. AM, I'm sorry.
AM.
It took so long.